Welcome back to HFO Multifamily MarketWatch, your trusted source for information for apartment owners and investors. Multifamily MarketWatch is presented by Pacific Exteriors Northwest, a contractor specializing in siding and exterior envelopes and delivering exceptional quality and service for over 30 years. And by Gantry Incorporated, the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm.
Welcome back to Multifamily Market Watch. I'm Greg Frick, partner with HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have back with us Ezra Hammer, shareholder of Jordan Ramus Law Firm.
Thank you, Greg.
Ezra, thanks for having me back. We're going to do a quick little thing about California's Builder's Remedy, which allows developers to bypass local zoning restrictions. Maybe talk about that and how that could maybe help spur development in this market that we've had many conversations with before.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just say, as a former California native myself, I have been so heartened to see how the Builder's Remedy was a useful tool down there to really move the needle on the conversation around housing.
Right.
And I do believe that it could be really valuable here in Oregon as well. A little bit of history, but in California, historically, jurisdictions were given populations that they needed to plan for, similar to what we do here in Oregon. And a lot of that population, those population numbers were born out of an understanding of existing capacity, right? How much vacant land do you have?
How much developable land do we have?
Right.
Infrastructure.
How much development have you had historically? Okay, we're going to use that to generate a number. And so what happened was you had wealthy jurisdictions that put the kibosh on multifamily housing to begin with and understood the game that they were playing with the state. And so put in place a system that would minimize growth and minimize available land. And so they would get low numbers year after year after year. The state changed all that, and they said, that doesn't make any sense, right? We're seeing no growth in Beverly Hills, but we're seeing unlimited growth in Los Angeles.
A game in the system.
Right, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so they basically changed the rules to look retrospectively and say, listen, there was all this housing that you should have built over the last 20 years, but you never did. Now you're responsible for that as well. And that led to an absolute uproar at the local jurisdictions. And unlike Oregon, California doesn't have the same experience with the state coming over the top on land use. Historically, it had been very focused on local control. And so you had jurisdictions say, we're not going to play by these new rules. We don't care. And
because the state had never really got involved in that.
That's right. And so the state would send a letter and they would toss it in the trash, or the city attorney would read it and the city councilors would laugh and they'd move on. And under Gavin Newsom, that really shifted, where there was a recognition and a reframing around housing as something absolutely critical to the state. They're losing population, they are rent burdened, they are housing burdened. It's impacting the lowest income residents the most. And California said, enough of this. We're going to start enforcing our rules. One of the rules they started enforcing was this Builder's Remedy, which basically says if a jurisdiction is out of compliance with the housing-related regulations that the state has told them to implement, you, developer, don't have to comply with them. You can build any housing so long as it meets the building code standards, fire, life, safety, and it can be as tall as you want, and it can be in any zone that you want, and you don't have to go through a 3, 4, sometimes 5-year review process at the local level. And even the threat of that dramatically transformed how cities operated. Some cities, they actually went to litigation to try to stop these projects, and those projects got approved, and those projects are moving forward. Long stalled developments, quarries that have sat empty for decades. I think of Pacifica, which is a small community outside of San Francisco, Cupertino, also outside of San Francisco, abandoned auto malls, kind of general blights on the community that people had opposed using for housing for decades are now turning into vibrant communities. In other places, the cities recognized the risk and either updated their codes to come in line with the state or set up a process where if a developer agreed not to seek a builder's remedy, they would get an expedited review process. They would have certain
working with the developers to
becoming engaged.
Right.
And that has just produced tremendous results. You're getting a lot of projects going through the builder's remedy process, but more importantly, it was a total sea change with the jurisdictions because some of them were so scared of that risk. And so they made it more reasonable for people to build housing in those cities. Now, in Oregon, our process is a little bit different. We don't have a lot of cities that are refusing to comply with state law in the same way that they were in California. That just isn't the tone that cities take. Here, they take anti-growth approaches in other ways, right? You have the city of Portland that puts in place a series of regulations that are unusable, such that it's prohibitively costly to build housing. They do things like set minimum densities in areas that can't sustain tall buildings and then shrug their shoulders when people say they can't get financing for 40-story towers. You have other jurisdictions that kind of refuse to rezone property to allow for housing, and then others that just guard their urban growth boundaries in ways that prohibit any housing from coming to fruition. So I think in Oregon, a builder's remedy would really take a different form. And it would be based off of kind of the housing needs analysis that each city is required to produce, and then the growth projections associated with that. So the city of Portland, we adopted a housing needs analysis and associated housing production strategy back in 2023, 2024, and we are nowhere close to those numbers. If you look at the region as a whole over the last 8-year reporting period, we built 45% of all the homes that we were expected to build. So you look at Happy Valley and Beaverton and Hillsborough, and you add everybody up.
45%.
We built 45% of what they had projected. And so I think what Builder's Remedy would do would come in, the state would come over the top and they would say, listen, you have your regulations, you have your targets. If you're going to aggressively miss your targets for a number of years, we're going to know that your regulations are out of whack. We don't need to go and look at them with particularity. We know that the system is broken. And so in that case, I can envision a world where the state says, hey, City of Portland, you're missing your housing production numbers by 80% for 3 years in a row. Guess what? Your zoning code is out the window. Guess what? No more historic review. Okay. Like we've had enough of that, and it's produced a world where nobody can build. And so what we're going to do is say, people want to build housing, they can build it so long as you comply with fire life safety standards. And that's a world where we really recognize the common good that housing is, right? For a long time in this city and throughout the state, we've treated the development of housing as something to be skeptical of, right? Something to be scared of, something that is going to change the character, the culture, the community vibes. We need to reset that conversation, right? The most recent count tells us that 52% of Oregonians are housing burdened. That's both people paying their mortgages and people paying their rent, more than 30%. We can't have half the state being housing burdened because it's sucking the life out of the rest of our economy. And it's inhibiting those families' ability to participate in civil society in the way that we need them to. And so we need to flood the zone with housing. And I think the Builder's Remedy could be a tool where the state says, until we start seeing things go on the right track, we need a hammer, right? The time for the little chisel has gone. And now we're going to build housing.
We've got to move the needle.
Got to move the needle.
Yeah. And like you said, if some cities may look at it differently and be proactive and say, if this is really coming, there needs to be the threat that the state's going to come and change. Do you think we could get momentum for something like that? What's kind of the feedback you get as you talk to other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the signs are all pointing in the right direction. I was really heartened to hear the governor say that she wants to explore a builder's remedy here for Oregon. I think that conversation came out of a working group that she had set up with Mayor Wilson and some folks in the business community and development community in downtown. And that was one of the deliverables that they agreed to work on. That was the same working group that came up with the STC exemption. I think what we're going to see is a recognition by the state that business as usual isn't functional, right? You can waive a lot of the fees, but unless you do away with the regulations as well, it's still too onerous. And so in a world where the builder's remedy becomes a useful tool, that's one where, hey, a year from now, 2 years from now, are we seeing the needle moving? And if not, what is the break the glass scenario? And what do we need to really get production in line with what the existing needs are? I think the most recent numbers show our region having a housing deficit of somewhere between 45 and 60,000 units of housing. And that's really just born out of an understanding of households and units of housing. We're still dealing with an unprecedented homelessness crisis, some of which is driven by the fact that housing is far too expensive in this region. And there's a huge vulnerable population out there that is one check away from losing their housing. And so I can see all of that as being justification for the governor to say, we need a reset.
We need to fast track that. We need to get something going to move this needle.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have success. I mean, we'll do what we can to get this message out because I think there's finally a recognition, maybe not locally on the local side a little bit, but from the state that how housing, what it does to the state's well-being, to the population. And again, we're not factoring in if we get a population growth and things can come back from a job growth in that, we're going to be even more underproduction. So there has to be some momentum to get these things going.
I think we can get there, Greg. I walk around my neighborhood and I'm heartened by all the signs that I see where people say refugees are welcome. We welcome other people. We need need to take that energy around welcoming people and make sure that they actually have a place to live. And I think this approach on housing is going to get there. Historically, a pro-housing position, it was taken only by Republicans, and Democrats were very scared of that. We've seen that change, right? The governor is now the number one champion on housing. And I think having seen the last session, having seen some of our new elected leaders in Salem understanding the impacts of lack of housing, I'm heartened that we're going to get there. And I think we will see a sea change in a way that gets us the builder's remedy or some equivalent to really reset the conversation on housing production.
And even the ones that are still kind of anti-housing, I mean, just from a property tax revenue side, I think that alone on that argument, we've got to change the narrative. If not, like you said, if you're not growing as a city, you're going the other way. We've got to change the direction we've been heading.
That's 100% right. And, as I like to say to elected leaders, listen, especially in Portland, we have progressive values. And those progressive values have us wanting to spend lots of money on social services. And the only way that we're going to get that lots of money is if we grow. We got to grow the pie. And we got to make sure there's more there to take care of those with the least. We're not going to do it with a shrinking population. We're not going to be able to do it with a shrinking tax base. We can only do it through growth.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for all the hard work you're doing. And we'll see you again next time on Multifamily Market Watch. Thank you.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is a member of Global Real Estate Advisors. Learn more at grea.com.